On September 16th, uh, you said a sad indicator of how things are going is for the number of times I take single parents to the pawn shop so they can pawn their electronics for grocery money. That phone could save their life, but they're having to pawn it off for grocery money in the moment. Is that right?
Oh yeah, electronics or jewelry, gold. That's the two main things. I mean, there's lots of factors to it. Again, cost of living, underlying issues, their rent, things like that, emergency expenses. The, the pawn shops are the banks of many vulnerable people. I still do a lot of work there with a lot of families, and their only access to getting food sometimes, or paying the month's rent, or getting medicine for their children
Yeah.
is pawning things. And pawn stores are the banks of the impoverished.
My name is Kevin, and I'm one of Mark's volunteers. Welcome to the podcast. In this episode 4, we're going to answer these questions coming up. How did an Indigenous mom's experience with intergenerational trauma and child welfare impact her ability to parent her children? What desperate measures did a single mom take after income support cut her off? And how did it affect her and her child? How did a temporary guardianship order complicate one mother's ability to stay involved in her children's lives? How does Mark work with vulnerable families to ensure that they get the support they need from social services? What common gaps in the system force families to pawn their belongings or face homelessness while awaiting help? In this podcast, Mark opens up about the real-life struggles of the families he's helped and continues to help, who are caught in a broken system. Mark's first-hand experiences highlight how the system often falls short, leaving people vulnerable and desperate. He shares these powerful stories to raise awareness, advocate for change, and call for more compassionate solutions. Episode 4. Here we go. How's your week been?
Oh, kind of clunky,
I
kind of
got
intense,
that sense. That's a good word for it, clunky.
kind of intense.
I do want to thank you sincerely for taking the time to uh, be on this podcast number 4 that we're doing. I know your time is very valuable, and I really do appreciate you being here. And obviously, there have been some delays. We tried to record this podcast almost a month ago, and
Yeah, and I had a
you
killer migraine.
yeah, you weren't
I was
feeling too well.
got nauseous, and I was just terrible. It
You,
was
you,
just a migraine, and I couldn't even focus. And I don't know if you can salvage some of that, mush it in with this one.
I'm gonna try, but you obviously always say things that are of interest. They just kind of got to a point where we had to call it quits, and here we are a
Yeah.
few weeks later to try again. But thanks for being here, Mark. We all appreciate you and everything that you have to say, your personal opinions, your insights, your perspective, the stories you have to tell, and again, just thank you for doing this. I always appreciate seeing you and talking with you.
Yeah, no, and I've got lots of things on my mind right now
Yeah.
regarding children's services, regarding adult welfare, regarding police school resource officers, just a bunch of things.
We'll see how far we get here. I did take out a couple of the stories. I thought we did a pretty good job. Not quite sure where you want to start, but obviously you dove right into the uh, uh, that meeting with child welfare yesterday, and of course your thoughts on that. So appreciate you bringing that up right away.
Yeah, I had another meeting today with a mom. It involves an Indigenous mom who has 7 children, 4 of which are in care. She's a victim of intergenerational trauma. She's had a lot of trauma in her life by no fault of her own. And this, of course, impacts how she becomes a parent and the supports and the way she needs to be approached. And I find it ironic because this is the week, September 30th was Truth
Mhm.
and Reconciliation Day.
Yes,
So,
yes, it
you
was.
know,
Thank you for mentioning that.
and I keep trying to incorporate that feelings and that philosophy in everything that I do.
Hmm.
I met with the mom, and it was very heartbreaking and hard to listen to about how her children were taken from her, how she felt that the child welfare had shoved a pile of papers in her face and wanted her to sign these documents that she really wasn't. She was in a crisis when she was asked to sign this, and she didn't really understand what she was signing, so she refused. And somehow that was implied that that'd be used against her. She went to visit one of her children, who's, I guess, at an extended family member, and she thought it would be okay. And the extended family member freaked out on her, and she left, so she couldn't visit with her child. She left that distraught. But the more alarming thing, Kevin, with this one is, at least again, it's just solely based on this woman's information and, child welfare. Where I'm trying to set up a meeting, but I don't have any information on child welfare's position or side of the story or anything. But based on solely with just chatting with her, my concern is that now there's different levels of intrusiveness or different levels of care that children's services can have under the Child, Family, and Youth Enhancement Act, which is the Child Welfare Act, I guess I call it. There's a family enhancement agreement, which is really community focused. Parents remain the guardian. There's a supervision order where the parent or parents remain the guardian, but child welfare through the courts have directed that the parents have to do certain tasks or behave in a certain manner. Could be abstaining from alcohol, drugs, whatever. Then there's a custody order or custody agreement, where there's an agreement between the guardian and children's services, where child welfare is a bit more intrusive and can place the child and, of course, make decisions about that child involving maybe school or treatment or placements or things like that. And then you get into the real intrusive ones, there's temporary guardianship order, where child welfare basically, again, I'm not a lawyer, as you know, but it's just my layman's term, is that they're kind of sharing guardianship with the parent on the child. And then there's a permanent guardianship order where child welfare becomes mom and dad. So in this case, it's involving a temporary guardianship order. So mom is still the guardian and still needs to be informed and consulted, and her feedback and her input matters. But from what I'm hearing from mom is that these children are coming to see her and they got bruises and huge scrapes, and they've had medical issues. There's schooling issues. There's sociological issues. There's cultural issues. And child welfare hasn't been consulting with mom about any of this. So this is another frustrating thing that I dealt with today is reaching out to child welfare to try to set up a meeting and make sure that we can set the course right, where mom has meaningful and robust visits with her children, and to try to ensure that children's services is working to reintegrate the children back with mom and provide mom and the children the support so that they can thrive and move on in their life. Mom was just very distraught, and she had searched me out to see if I could help her. So that was another rough one today. Those are kind of the battles. And then yesterday I had one where, again, a single mom, Métis, was involved in a very abusive relationship with her partner. Sometimes I like to call it as like stupid boyfriend or stupid girlfriend syndrome, where somebody falls in love with somebody and it's a bad choice, and that person becomes complete anchor on, or I should say anchor, but a complete liability on that family. And this was the case with this lady. She fell in love and they had a relationship and they had a child, and this guy ended up being a jerk, um, a crook and a jerk. And mom was taken advantage of, and the father was cheating on his welfare. So he had a job and he was claiming that he didn't, and he was collecting welfare on the side. And he was really impacting this family. It was emotional and physical abuse. mom has broken off that relationship, and this guy keeps trying to fight her in court with all these frivolous claims for. So they're fighting over a parenting order. But the issue is that because she is on her own now, and because she's very limited in what she can do, and her son is, has a lot of needs, she got cut off by income support. And this has been happening a lot lately because income support has been asking clients for their bank statements. And if there's anything that doesn't look right from income support's perspective, at least it's been my experience recently, that they have been cutting off benefits. And this is what happened to mom. And the reason for that is that there were some sums of money put into her bank, and she had excuses for this. It's because she had to borrow money and then pay back the money. So you had these large sums of money coming into her bank account and then coming out, because people don't use cash anymore. It's all direct deposits and e-transfers. And when income support got suspicious and cut her off, well, mom did what many people do, single parents have done when they're facing that situation, and she was sexually exploited. So she was, you know, involving herself online and being sexually exploited so she could have some money to feed her child. And of course, that in itself caused even more trouble and harm for her, because that was sort of good enough for income support to absolutely cut her off. So that forces her into that trade. No, I should say trade. It's not a business or a trade. It forces her into that trajectory. So I've been working with her to try to help her with a damage deposit, help her with some rent, and so that she doesn't have to be exploited, so that she can meet the needs of her child. Yeah, so I was dealing with that one as well. That's a big problem. Is sexual exploitation. Is we don't give enough funds, and we don't provide enough to families and single parents to survive, especially with inflation and rents and the housing shortage. So sometimes parents turn to crime, or sometimes they turn to being exploited sexually, um, just so that they can survive. And it's a terrible situation that I'm dealing with right now with a lot of families, actually.
Yeah. Uh, I've been on income support at times myself, Mark, as I've said before. And um, I'm not going to get into, I think, the rabbit
No,
hole that
no.
is everything income support, but I will say, to your point just now, where it's not enough. And they, the sense I got that I've had when I've been on it is they do look for. This is again my view, but I've heard it echoed elsewhere, where they do look for any excuse not to give it to you, and they'll cut you off before they. And then you give them a call and what's going on here, and then they want to have that conversation with you, and but they still question everything. It's not enough, and it's frankly an insult to the people who need it, but it's better than nothing if you can get it. I don't know what else to say more on that without getting into a passionate rant, but certainly I want to say a little bit more privileged than some of the people that you've helped over the years, and certainly not having to put myself into a position where I have to do sex work. I don't. I'm no judgment, but thank God I've never had to do it. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's whatever people are needing to do to make ends meet, to feed their child, to pay their rent, what have you. And of course, there are the individuals who know to contact you, and hopefully, maybe you can help them out a little bit to make things work for that particular month or situation. Yeah, the whole system for income support, never mind child welfare, definitely needs to be overhauled, to be much more, beneficial, to be polite and diplomatic about it, for those that need it, because, I know myself, during the peak of the pandemic, Um, it was stressful enough to need the income support, never mind to have to beg for it.
Yeah.
That's traumatizing in itself. And I told them that. It's like, I'm just trying to get a little bit of help here to buy some groceries and feed my cat and pay my rent. That's it. I'm not asking, I'm not looking to take a vacation or retire here anytime soon. I'm just looking to very much cover the basics. And they're picking apart my bank account. It's like, really, we have nothing better to do? Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so
Well,
it's along those lines.
yeah,
We need to treat people a lot better than we do, especially those who are who are in vulnerable positions.
exactly, Kevin. I mean, you're dealing with a single mom with a child or children, or a single dad with a child and children, and they're haggling that, where did this $97 come from? Or where did this $150 come from? Or, why do you have a car? Or like, why are you paying this much rent? And what compounds all of this is, in the good old days, income support used to come to your residence and you had a relationship with a worker. Um, and
You've talked about that before, yeah.
yeah, and now it's just a call center, uh, where you're dealing with whoever you talk to. There's usually, literally, it's one of the few lines you can call and say, basically in a polite way, we're too busy today, call back tomorrow, click. Or you're on a 4-hour waiting list and you're listening to elevator music for 3 or 4 hours. Or it's just a really, again, this is just my personal opinion, it's a really cumbersome, uh, apathetic, patronizing system where there's no relationships and there's no emotional connection. Um, I had a great teacher once who told me that his goal was to make one emotional connection with a child per year. I don't know if he made the emotional connection with me, but I certainly made an emotional connection with him. And he was one of my favorite teachers. And I remember that. And this is from elementary school, that Mr. Mays. And so I try to make emotional connections with everybody I'm involved with, like my client. But I don't see that happening, because if you make an emotional connection, you're able to understand, and you should show some empathy. You seem to perceive what's going on, and you're sort of in the game with the person trying to help them out. There's no emotional connections now. There's no interactions. The pandemic certainly hype this all up, where you're just listening to a voice and it's a different voice every time you phone. So income support, I think, is just a big mess. I think they aren't meeting the needs of Albertans. I think, and it's not the workers, it's the system that is directing the workers.
And I want to
It's the,
emphasize that too. The workers that I talked to personally, height of the pandemic, I spent 3 hours on hold listening to elevator music. That's true. But the ladies I talked to were lovely. I know they're getting yelled at because, given the nature of people who are struggling and having to make, just the fact that you have to call means you're under stress, right?
yeah,
So, but they were lovely. And I told them this. It's like when I talk to somebody, maybe it's a bad comparison, but my cell phone company, right? I make it clear, like if I get to vent about something or complain about something, it's like, I'm not yelling at you, guy, or I'm not yelling at you, at you, ma'am. This call is being recorded for the company, so I'm venting at the company. You're just doing your job. The thing that stuck out to me when I was on it, income support, wasn't so much the relationship. It's like, okay, fine, you be kind to me, I'll be kind to you, and this all works out. I get the money that I need this month, hopefully. Well, not all the money that I need that month, but
yeah,
something. Um, but it was, in hindsight, and even to a point at the time, it was a matter of not being well informed. I'd
yeah,
because there was a few times where I wasn't cut off, but they'd be doing what's that called? The audit. So they look at your bank statements
yeah.
or
These forensic audits,
that
they're very onerous. And
they are.
you also have to realize that when you're working with people on the phone,
Yeah.
people have different strengths and different challenges, and dealing with everybody on the phone is not for everybody. It's not like you have this tremendous pool of employees that have all these strengths, and many of them have degrees in the humanities, whether it be psychology or education or social work, and they're working in a call center and they can't use these skills like they should be. And on the other side, you have clients that have vulnerable people that have organic issues and environmental issues. And again, so their challenges and their barriers are a lot different, and they have difficulty articulating. Maybe many of them have difficulty articulating on the phone. Well, there is no option B. Again, many of the workers I deal with in all systems are nice human beings in that, but I think the system molds you into being not the best person you can be at both ends of the scale. Either you're a recipient of the system or you're a deliverer of the system. So,
Yeah,
but
but
on
sorry, I just want one last
okay,
thing on income support. We'll move on to some other things that you've tweeted about. That when I said about the lack of being informed, there were different conversations that I had when I've needed income support, particularly earlier on, again during the peak of the pandemic, where I'd be getting pieces of information of you need this or you need that, and that'll make it easier for you not to be audited, or that'll this will or whatever their criteria were to kind of smooth out that process. So when I need it this month, I can apply for it, have things in place. And there's very little questioning, and they just give me they've given me the money that particular month, and that's much less stressful than having to call in and beg for it. They're so overwhelmed, and it's no longer 3-hour waits, but the staffing is limited, resources are limited, and that's the fault of the government and the system. Absolutely. But for some of the information that they've needed, like a doctor's note or what have you, and which sounds obvious, but again, it's um, within context and this, and what I was dealing with at the time. Um, where I wasn't properly informed of these are the things that you can do to make this a smoother process, or to where things aren't being questioned and so forth. That took a few tries. It's that they're so overwhelmed where they're just going through the motions. They're going through the routine of it. The ladies are lovely. It's been ladies that I've spoken to, but they can't think of everything, I guess, off the top of their head or whatever, or some of them aren't even properly trained, but that's another conversation. You figure it out, but it needs to be a much more well-oiled machine in order to, as we have said, help out the vulnerable people who need it without adding the stress and trauma of applying for income support. Never mind AISH. If it's okay, I'm going to move on to a few of your other tweets or the
oh sure,
stories you've shared. Your thoughts in terms of the remand, and then you became ill and we had to end the call. But so I wanted to kind of revisit that, see if you had anything further to say. But that kind of the headline that I have here is Rethinking the Remand, Proposed Cost-Effective Alternatives to Support Nonviolent Offenders in Edmonton. Just want to put the idea out there to save taxpayers a lot of money. Our somewhat new Edmonton Remand Center is a supermax security institution. This costs many hundreds of dollars per day per inmate. It currently holds 1,500 people. I question why we cannot have minimum security quasi remand centers as well. Many folks have no support or stable address and then run into problems, and some have addictions issues. Why not designate treatment centers or supportive housing programs as remand centers, and therefore allow a less intrusive and cheaper solution? This is a win-win. You finish off by saying, I'm not speaking of persons who are habitual offenders or charged with severe violence. But I also remind folks that those on remand status are presumed innocent and haven't pled or been found guilty of anything. So, did you want to, if you kind of revisit those thoughts and anything you might have to say on that end now that you're feeling well again?
yeah. I believe that if you had a halfway house approach or a group home or a group residential center, you don't need the physical security. You don't need the bulletproof windows and the magnet lock doors and the razor wire. You have what's called dynamic security, where people have a stable living environment. They have some structure and some rules and some supervision. So they don't need all that brick and mortar stuff. If you're living in a tent in the river valley, you're much more at risk of being victimized as well as being victimizing others because of your situation. So if you're able to say you've been charged with, let's say, a common assault and you have no residence and or for whatever, you're remanded into custody, why would somebody like that have to go to a supermax prison when a halfway house or a group home it's less intrusive? Second of all, it allows the person to continue their intimacy with their supports and their family. The third thing, it allows them to continue to go to school or work and contribute to the community as opposed to be a liability to the community. So there's all these sorts of things that we can do as opposing to have this solid little brick box that we just stuff people into who we deem being on remand. And even if you're able to take out, let's say there is 1,500 or 1,800 people at the remand, I'm not sure. Let's say you were able to remove 50 or 100 of those people. Imagine the money that you're saving.
So I got to ask, why do you think it hasn't been done?
Well, it is done through, through parole and probation and through once you're sentenced, you go through
Once
that
you're
cycle.
sentenced, yeah.
But for remand, I don't know why we don't do it. It's something that I don't understand. I know under the Corrections Act, so let's say you're in remand and you get pushed off a ledge and fall off the tier and you break your leg and you have to go to the hospital and actually stay in a hospital bed. Under the act, they designate that hospital bed as a correctional center. And, so you can designate something as a correctional center or a remand status. It doesn't have to be wrapped around like a bow with razor wire. And it allows more reintegration, rehabilitation. And I think it just keeps our communities actually safer. If I was Justice or Solicitor General for a day, I would try to working with agencies such as in Edmonton, we have the Salvation Army or Edmonton John Howard Society or Elizabeth Fry Society, designating certain houses and programs as remand centers. And of course, you could, under remand, it would still be up to the Solicitor General to determine the level of security. There's a lot of flexibility. You're able to pivot. And I think it would be cheaper. So if I was Solicitor General for a day, that's what I would try to set up. I hope someone listening or watching this podcast kind of goes, hey, we should look at that more. And there's someone in government, let's get on this,
Absolutely. It does feel delayed. This feels like common sense to me. But the question that jumped to mind last time when we tried to record this, but also this time is, why is it a supermax prison? What determines that? When is it because some of these people are deemed to be severely
in the remand in the same cells in the same units
right?
as the guy that killed 3 or 4 people, or alleged to have. So you need a supermax prison
Okay.
for our most violent
Yeah,
and
yeah.
disruptive people. You do. I don't think anybody would argue that, but you don't have to put them all into the supermax prison.
It's their behavior that that demands the supermax prison.
Well,
The fact that they haven't
yeah.
but they haven't been convicted of that yet, so they're not going to, I guess, whatever prison they'd be going to next until they are.
So there's issues with gang violence. There's issues with protective custody, people with certain charges. So sometimes you need to have those sorts of facilities, these high security facilities for people. But there's a percentage that you don't. And I know now I worked 20 some years in youth court, and way back when Canada was jailing every kid that we could get our hands on, we had a really great program run by Alberta Hospital called Counterpoint. And it was a group home for children charged under those days, under the Young Offenders Act, who were charged with things like sexual interference, sexual assaults, and they needed treatment. So some of them were actually held at this group home run by Alberta Hospital called Counterpoint on remand status because their treatment was so critical. We have done it, and we used to call that open remand status under the yeah, in youth court. We have done it, so we should be doing it with adults. This would be my argument.
Yeah,
And
and to your point a moment ago where I was almost gonna say if I were convicted, but that's not what it's for. If I were placed, in the remand center and for a minor offense, but put in the same cell as I was going to say serial killer, but I don't, just it's someone who's more violent, right?
yeah,
That doesn't feel like something that should be to be happening, and that he can stay in his cell, but I want to go over to kind of halfway house or whatever the little safer place to be.
what was that movie with Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder where they went to prison?
I
And
met
they
I
this,
it I
that
bet
this big,
yeah.
huge, hulking guy walks into the cell with them, but he's just a little, baby. It's just like that. Your cellmates, all of a sudden, this guy been charged with 3 first-degree murders and,
Yeah,
mother tattooed on his shoulder, and it's
that's
like
right.
he's
Yeah.
got trees as his arms, you know.
We laughed about it,
We could
but it was
no, yeah.
it would scare the crap out of me, Mark. It
Well, can and this is the issue when you're dealing with
doesn't feel
youth
appropriate.
who are you're 18 or 19
Yeah,
and you're putting in a cell with a 40-year-old man
yeah,
who's much more hardened. So
that's right.
there's a lot of growth in that area, Kevin. I think we could move forward but we seem to get ministers that are just so, I don't want to say boring, but so they don't look at innovation. They don't seem to look at ideas. They don't look at best practices. What
Yeah,
they look at is they look at their deputy ministers and their assistant deputy ministers who've been sitting there for freaking decades. There's no innovation. There's no evolving. And we get what we get now. That's my opinion. I'm inviting people to always challenge me because, I could be wrong, but that's what I see from my window anyways, what's next?
sounds good. What's next? He says August 21st. I have there's a headline that says still searching. Efforts to help a homeless woman secure medication and supportive housing continue. You said you were out on the street looking for a homeless lady. I said I would help get her coverage for her prescription medication and find supportive housing, but I can't seem to find her. I will keep looking. Do you remember that day? Were you able
Oh
to
yeah,
find
yeah,
her,
yeah.
find
And
her and help her?
that's a common situation. Uh no, I don't think I did find her, not that day. I think she called me about a week later from the hospital because she was diabetic and she wasn't able to get her insulin or some of her blood tests done. And so things spiraled down.
Mhm.
And again, another example of what homelessness can really do. If your medical needs aren't taken care of and you don't have a place, you're going to end up in a hospital bed costing the Alberta taxpayers a lot more money because, again, we have no housing. That's a fairly common scenario, actually. I mean, not per se everything that happened there, but you're trying to get into contact with somebody that's homeless, maybe because you don't want them to forget they have a court date or that their daughter is ill and they need to find the person, or um, there's a house that has come available or a treatment program, and they have no phone. So you have to go find them, say, hey, there's this bed available for you now at the Salvation Army. Let's go. Well, you got to find them. So it happens a fair bit. You end up leaving messages with extended family, with friends, with people that that hang out with them and that. So it's always hit and miss.
I'm glad she got a hold of you. Nothing happened to her in the meantime, which could happen as well when people are out on the street, as you've talked about. Also, on August 21st, you said today I found myself at a drugstore picking up essential items: baby formula, diapers, and wipes for a newborn and a family with nothing. They were promised support and resources, but have received nothing. You put it in all caps. This is how our child welfare system. This isn't. Excuse me. How our child welfare system should function. It's what I call a dump and run. Children's Services took the child, and as soon as the family said yes, they just dumped the child there. My visit here has stirred up emotions, primarily frustration and concern, regarding how we handle child welfare cases involving newborns. While I acknowledge I could be mistaken in my assumptions, I am compelled to share my thoughts and experiences. Did you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, so I actually had two cases in the last couple months where I was really concerned about how the newborn. So there's a specialized child welfare unit called ABERT. And again, they're great people. They're highly specialized and trained. And I don't know what ABERT stands for. They work in collaboration with Alberta Health Services. And they're the social workers that are lurking around the maternity wards and delivery rooms. I think everybody realizes that it is critical that baby and mom maintain that contact. But there's certain times and circumstances where that doesn't happen. So in that situation was a situation where mom has some real challenges
Mm-hmm.
and just wasn't able to keep baby safe. So the baby was taken to extended family, which is the way that's the next best thing and the
Generally,
loving family.
that's right.
But just to give you an example in that case, so the family members so it's this Indigenous family, and the family members that they dropped off at the Cookham's house, at the Cookham's residence, was in a hotel room because Cookham is in a hotel room because she's homeless and she has special needs as well. So they dropped the baby off at the baby's kind of under the care of this Cookham at the hotel room. And the baby's called, and I don't know what the medical term is, but what you call tongue tied and can't feed. It has difficulty feeding in that. So the baby has specialized bottles. And so child welfare dropped off one specialized bottle in a hotel room. Now, what's ringing in people's minds? And just to see if this is what children workers, child welfare workers have to think all the time. Well, this is it. You're in a hotel room.
The issue is that, as I recall from what you said, she couldn't sterilize the bottles.
Exactly. I, having three boys, stuck 1,000,005 bottles into
Yeah.
50 or 60 babies in my lifetime, know that you need to sterilize bottles. But I get passionate and dump and run in the sense that you didn't think about the bottles. You gave one bottle. You didn't think about the environment. The baby was there. There's no way to sterilize the bottles. And you disappear. They disappeared after they dropped off the baby in that, and
That's the dump and run.
There was no follow-up with income support. So
Right.
income support wasn't providing enhanced services, or Cookham was on AISH. So AISH wasn't providing enhanced services for the child. So it was a slow starvation. You ran out of baby formula, your one bottle, you couldn't sterilize. You didn't have enough food. You didn't have enough resources. You didn't have enough emotional support. The things start crumbling down. And then all of a sudden
Hence why you're passionate
it's,
and
yeah.
venting about this, right?
And then so it's like,
Yeah.
and of course, no one likes to bug me because everybody says, "Oh, Mark, you're so busy. You're so busy." So the family waited till it was a crisis. And then said, "Mark, we have no food. We can't get a hold of anybody from child welfare. The baby hasn't eaten it." But you know what? I had a meeting, and then I had another case involving a newborn. I had a meeting with the manager of AVERT, and the person's really understands things and basically knew what I was talking about and understood the issues, and invited me to provide any feedback that I have and to engage with them. And if we're having problems with the frontline worker, can't get a hold of them, or the supervisor, just get a manager right away. So it was a good outcome, and both newborn babies are doing well now. And Avert's still a really good unit. I'm glad the city has it. At least Edmonton has it.
Yeah, I looked it up. According to the AHS itself, it's the Alberta Vulnerable Infant Response Team.
Yeah, everybody's got to have an acronym. If I was running it, I'd call it the Baby Savers.
They seem kind of essential when they work well.
Oh, they are. I just don't know why they have to use an acronym.
Yes.
Government
Glad
institutions love acronyms.
bureaucracy. Glad the baby got what they needed, though.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, but it's like always reinventing the wheel.
Like I say, it's a dump and run sense. I can appreciate why you got emotional about it. Why you recorded the video on Instagram, sharing your thoughts in the moment, which I know got quite a bit of response. Thank you for bringing attention to that. Even if
Yeah.
most of the time, or hopefully most of the time, Avery does a much better job.
And, I really want to say this because um, it's critical.
Go for it.
Regardless of what my gripes and groans and moans and complaining of children's services is and does and what it doesn't do, they are still the best of the best. They are still, when you see a 3-year-old wandering through traffic in dirty diapers or hearing the pounding of a fist against a wall and screaming of children, they are superheroes. These are the people we need to call. And your confidentiality is protected. So that never knows that the neighbor called or the person down the street or the grandmother or Uncle Fred or big brother, even if the child called. I'm invested, and maybe I'm so passionate about children's services because they're so essential and they're so important and they save so many lives. And they have to be elite. They have to continue to be elite. They have to be the best of the best, because if they aren't, children will start dropping and dying. And it's unfortunate that they're here, but they will always need to be here, and they will always need to be well funded. Their workers will need to be supported, and their systems need to understand how important and critical child welfare is. So,
Yeah, and as far as I can tell, they're not well funded.
no, I don't
And
think they are. I think
yeah,
they're just, it's always the bare minimum that,
yeah,
and the government, they always skew things like, Mr. Speaker, we've invested $720 million into children's services just the last year. And you hear this roar,
yeah, that's right.
bench, bench backers
Yeah,
pounding their desk. But per capita, we're still the lowest in Canada, it's just underwhelming.
yeah.
Don't be fooled by the dramatics of it all. Look at the facts. And the facts is that our children's services is underfunded. And I don't care what minister stands up and says what, and, the premier chuckles it off. It's our system sucks. And it's
It
not
does at
because,
times.
it's not because of, the
Yes.
workers as much as it's because it's
No,
underfunded. We
but
can do so much better, and we need
could
to do so much better.
thousand
There.
percent. And I'll also add, thank you for bringing attention to the flaws and for bringing awareness to the things that are going wrong, so that hopefully they'll be improved.
Yeah, I wouldn't hold my breath on that last bit. It's just, again, my experience when I'm involved in a specific case,
Yes.
I won't stop until things are fixed. I remember way back in the 90s and early 2000s, when we had a minister called Iris Evans. I think she was completely ill-suited for the Ministry for Children's Services. I remember we had a protest with foster kids once at the legislature, and she was all alarmed that these kids in care were protesting against her. And she was walking around with a clipboard trying to get everybody's name. And she comes up to me, goes, "What's your name?" I'm like, "I'm not giving you my name, uh, Mr. Government Minister." She was a terrible minister, at least in my opinion. We had a case where a kid she called me from Southgate Transit Center in minus 30-degree weather in a very light cotton shirt. And she was like shaking on the phone. This was before cell phones. So I went to pick her up, and they had nowhere to put her or place her. So I took her over to Iris Evans' office in Sherwood Park and just waited in her office, their constituency office. And this was in the early 2000s. She got mad at me and everybody got mad at me, but you know what? That kid found a place. They found that kid a place. And I've invited the CBC and Global and CTV and APTN and all of them to some of these child welfare offices when there's situations, and I don't have any problem doing it in the future because I think this is our system. These are our children. As a community, the better they are, the better we are. If someone phones me about a child that's not being provided with, that's the hill I'm going to die on. And I think a lot of people would like to do what I do, but they don't have that freedom, which is another complete podcast. It's about how we're independent and we're funded by the government, but we're not really independent. And there's a lot of that going around too. So anyways, I'm just venting now.
Oh, excellent point. Thank you for saying those things. But I'll just put the kind of the pin in it just for a second. I really do want to even further emphasize, thank you for bringing attention to these issues, bringing awareness to them. And if something changes, gets better, as you know, you're in it to fix it. You said it yourself. So, but at least you're doing what your part in the position that you have to get to keep the conversation going uh, about the I would say these issues, but because for each of these individual stories that you're telling, there are patterns to it for those who pay attention. And if it's government officials or whoever, where not just you're helping, but uh, that something can change within that process. Because, like I say, the majority of the work that Children's Services does that ABER does is good work. But for the situations where they fall short, that deserves to be highlighted, be put on the news or what have you. But or even on a podcast, we can talk about it. But to get those conversations going to keep them accountable. On August 23rd, and I know we're going back a couple of months here, he said there are many factors associated with the rise in aggression toward public servants like librarians. What I see, and I'm quoting, of course, lack of social housing, reduction of wraparound supports, including mental health, increase of meth use among the homeless population, decrease in income supports, including AISH, fear of our Edmonton police, faith-based services like Hope Mission that are overly intrusive about Christian ideology, lack of day programs for the homeless population that causes a massive influx into libraries, recent restrictions at City Hall, you say are the best example, and your last point is statistical, I can never say that word, information and government communications hiding or minimizing social problems and responsibilities within Edmonton. That's my opinion for what it's worth. That's quite the tweet and kind of the list of concerns regarding the aggression towards public servants.
You're a human being.
Yeah.
You might have some organic issues, FASD, ADHD. You've had some trauma in your life. You're homeless. You haven't had a lot of supports. You going through the same emotions as we all go through. If I'm having a bad day, I can go home. I can kick my feet up. I can dim the lights. I can rest. And I have strategies to work through that. If you're homeless and you can't go anywhere, you can't sit anywhere, you can't sleep anywhere, you can't even stand anywhere, you don't have access to your medication, so your sugar levels are high. And because we're so crime aversive or risk aversive, the only really safe spot people can go to now are our libraries. And thank God for our libraries, or on our buses, or in our transit centers. These places aren't designed to be wraparound services and provide basic needs to people in crisis. They do provide warmth, positive socialization, but they don't certainly have the skill sets or the resources to deal with all your situations. And the agencies, again, this is my personal opinion, the agencies that we give millions of dollars in tax funding, example, the Hope Mission, is very Christian based, is very faith based. and they expunge everybody out of their centers at 8:30 or whatever in the morning, and go walk on the streets, and there's nowhere for these people to go. We should have drop-in centers. And because compounding this is that Kate's kicked out Boyle Street. There's nowhere. Boyle Street's kind of fragmented right now until they consolidate into whatever they're doing. There's nowhere for people to go and socialize and sit and envelop themselves in these wraparound services. Even our welfare offices, our income support offices, at one time, pre-pandemic, you could go in there and even on occasion get a cup of coffee and sit and warm and use the computers to job search and socialize with somebody, and provided some respite. And we had City Hall, but this is evolving to a call center type of model where we don't want these people anywhere, anytime.
Right.
We have an encampment. We walk by with box cutters and we slit all the tents and we kick them all out. We're at City Hall. Oh, now we've done all the security and you can't come in and sit there and twinkle on the piano anymore. If it's plus 38 degrees or minus 38 degrees, you can't go sit in Winston Churchill. Besides, you might be banned already from there because you were, skateboarding or doing something inappropriate in the washrooms or whatever. So you've got all these bans.
And so
And our buses aren't meant for this. The bus drivers are and our librarians have become frontline social workers because people are going to go where their basic needs are going to be met. And that might be away from the heat or away from the cold, or be able to sit and pretend to be awake, but and allowing you to get 20 minutes of rest or sleep. These are the only places that you can go now. Um,
yeah.
and it's a big shortcoming. And it's not just in Edmonton. And we've gotten really mean about it too. Cities and provinces and small towns. We used to have park benches, and now we put dividers in the park benches, so you can't even sleep on a park bench.
Mm.
We've got the sprinklers start turning on at all times of the day and night, sporadically to, just make people's lives misery so they don't stay there.
Right.
When we do look at a solution, it's always, God's my co-pilot. Let's find something with the word Jesus in it and give all our taxpayers' money to something that's really faith-based and colonial, and let them figure it out. And Hope Mission, in my personal opinion, just isn't up to snuff and isn't really uh, best organization to deal with these complex problems. At least that's what I see.
Hmm.
And again, people can challenge me. It's why we all live in a free and democratic society. We all have different opinions and different feelings.
I certainly in no way excuse public aggression toward anyone, but including
No,
public
yeah,
servants. Having said that, I can appreciate the pressures that people are under to get their basic needs met. So when people are going to libraries or transit centers or or what have you to try and access resources and things that they need, as you say, bus drivers and librarians and whoever um, are doing good work, but that's not what they're supposed to be doing, certainly not to that extent.
yeah,
Where they're frontline workers, basically, in dealing with these situations. So certainly, no one wants the librarian to get yelled at or abused or anything like that. When the system is flawed to such an extent where these people aren't being taken care of, I can appreciate why these situations are happening, and it made the news. I mean, you quoted, I think it was a CBC or a CTV story to add your comments to. So, hopefully that brought some attention and things might change,
yeah.
an hour later. I wanted to kind of talk about some monthly stats here if we can. You said, In August, I tried to help 72 people. This included two newborns under a month, one 96-year-old woman, and 33 persons in custody who were homeless at the time of their arrest. I drove six people to treatment centers, including to southern and northern Alberta. I attended court 14 times and sat in the emergency room of every major hospital in Edmonton. And course, as you say, I am a free service. What do your stats for September look like?
I haven't looked at them yet. I've got to go through my journals and my calendars and my contacts. But
What do you
it's
think? What?
more, it's
More?
greater because I mean, obviously I took time off in August. Yeah, it'd be more. But again, you're dealing with about, between 2 and 5 people a day. Well, you're dealing with, let's say, 25 days.
Yeah.
So yeah, it can be anywhere between.
Hmm.
Some days you get in, some months you get into 150, 100. I don't even know what the record is. I got to look at my Excel sheet and all that stuff again.
Right.
Yeah, could be a busy month. Was a busy month.
Sounds like it. So let us know what those stats are. I was hoping to get you on video saying that, but maybe you can record an Instagram video and share that with us.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I
Yeah,
will. I
appreciate
will
that.
do that.
Yeah, those are always some of my favorite videos as far as just putting context around things and just how busy you truly are.
Mm.
Um, help people better understand that. Let's see here. On September 12th, we're going to talk about this. You had an aunt call you in a panic. She stated that her niece, a single mom of 2 children, 1 and 8 years old, are freezing and wet. Mom had been on hold with income support for 4 hours.
Yeah.
Mom had been on hold, according to this aunt who called. I'll say that much. For 4 hours outside with children in the rain. They needed income support to renew their emergency accommodation at a motel. The children are now in physical peril, you said, according to what you knew at the time. I have sent an email to senior managers. If no word or assistance is received in 30 minutes, you'll call the minister's office. You say it's unacceptable and a child protection issue. Shortly thereafter, you had an update. Apparently, the mum directly called you. Thankfully, she refused to leave the hotel room and stand outside with her children in the rain because they were already sick. However, the stress of having nowhere to live with small children is still terrible. So
Yeah.
a little bit of miscommunication there.
So I got the aunt calling me. This is what she relayed to me. And then I followed up. And when I was in communication with the mom, it wasn't as,
Not quite as dire, but still a situation.
yeah. Yeah. And the issue is that these are the scenarios that have developed or evolved because, again, you're dealing with a situation where you have to call in. You're at the mercy of who's ever going to pick up or how long the waiting list is. And you end up becoming, you're on hold for 3 or 4 hours. And in that case, and this is what was so frustrating about it,
Mhm.
was not only that the situation where the family was in stress and in crisis and that the children were potentially going to be in harm's way,
Mhm.
was that they had been put up in the motel room by emergency social services because they were homeless.
Yes.
Now, it's been my experiences that in a lot of times, emergency social services um, nickels and dimes this. They'll do this for one night or 2 nights or 3 nights. And sometimes you're dealing with children in a family that you're looking at 8 or 9 nights. You can't really phone and ask for an extension until you've run out. So you wait until you've run out of nights.
Mm.
And then that morning you have to leave the motel room by 11 in the morning and you pick up the phone at 8 and
Right.
no one's answering and it's noon and you've got the hotel staff telling you to get out.
Right.
And so you're in a crisis. You and your 3 children, maybe one's asthmatic and it's wildfire season outside, or one's diabetic and or you have to sterilize a bottle and you're being thrown out on the street. I wish emergency social services would do is err on the side of caution and say, you know what, we're going to put it at for 8 nights. And on the fifth night, if you
Yeah.
still haven't found a place, give us a call or send us an email.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why can't you just text emergency social services and they would automatically renew the room, and remove
Yeah.
these stressors?
Exactly.
And again, it's not the
Yeah.
workers, it's
No,
the system. It's
that's
this
right.
frickin', and it's easy to blame someone, but it's more, in this case, something. And I think We
Oh,
need to
our
work on this problem and deal with it um,
yes.
by by changing policy, saying when you get a motel room, it's going to be automatically for 3 or 4 days, and on the second day you can reapply. That gives that error and that cushion so that you're not throwing children out on the street, or
Yeah.
I should say, this motel or that motel is throwing children out on the street because
Did that
there's
mom
no.
did that mom end up getting the income support,
Yes, yes,
maximum
yeah.
amounts?
She got a hold of me, and of course, I tweeted about it as it
Yeah.
evolved. But I also send emails to a group of people within income support that, particularly one guy, I'll just call him Jeff, who's very, very sympathetic and very good and very nice. They're able to work because they work with they work inside income support. They're able to direct some attention or highlight the issue. And that got solved fairly quickly
Okay.
after I was contacted. So,
So yeah, a more thoughtful, pragmatic, and practical approach on income support. Realistic, never mind that. Uh,
yeah. So, yeah, I wish I could just say it like you. It's 3 or 4 words.
a more pragmatic, more practical, more realistic approach for otherwise it's just stressful. On September 16th, you said a sad indicator of how things are going is for the number of times I take single parents to the pawn shop so they can pawn their electronics for grocery money. I try to help when I can, but the demand is so high, it is never enough. Today is no different.
I mean, there's lots of factors to it. Again, cost of living, underlying issues, their rent, things like that, emergency expenses. The, the pawn shops are the banks of many vulnerable people. That's where you get instant loans. That's where you get instant cash. That's where you can deal with your financial situation or emergency within 20 minutes. But that's quite a cost. And it involves, you give your child a bicycle at springtime and you're pawning it in summertime, and you don't make that pawn, that bicycle's gone.
Hmm.
So it's a very precarious situation.
Yeah.
It just really highlights what poverty is all about. And I don't think it's really anybody's fault. I think we certainly could be doing a lot better in a lot of different areas. Situation
Uh,
of what poverty is.
absolutely.
When I ran in for the NDP
Yeah.
2019 for um, Greaseball, that area, which covered 95th Street, 96th Street, 97th Street, in the inner city, that was one of the top 10 worst areas in Canada for child poverty. I remember doing a number of interviews,
Let
doing some interviews for
so
elections and that.
yeah.
I would bring up this fact, or I'd door knock and I'd bring up this fact. So I went on, I forget what Statistic Canada, Stats Can, and found that Griesbach, as a federal riding, was one of the top 10 most impacted child poverty ridings there was in the country, in the top 10. When I was doing these interviews with the local news and that, or I was door knocking, sometimes I'd bring up this fact that this riding is really has an issue with children's poverty, child poverty. No response. People, oh yeah, that's nice. But what about my taxes? Or what do you think about renewable energy? And Jagmeet Singh's, position on this. And I just think, yeah, it wasn't a big issue for people. And, but the fact remains that it still is a very impoverished area. I still do a lot of work there with a lot of families, and their only access to getting food sometimes, or paying the month's rent, or getting medicine for their children
Yeah.
is pawning things. And pawn stores are the banks of the impoverished.
Being the kind of IT person that I am, the first thing that jumped to mind for me when I read that is, so they're pawning their electronics. Does that include cell phones that they might use to call 911, or laptops that they might use to apply for something like income support? So they're pawning these things off potentially for grocery money. Is that right?
Oh yeah, electronics or jewelry, gold. That's the two main things: electronics and jewelry. Tools, work boots, things that. So yeah, things like things of things that are
Things that they
practical and
need.
value. Yeah. Yeah.
things that they need to get they're pawning off to get the grocery money
Yeah.
that they
Yeah.
need to feed their kid. But
Did
you
and it used to be Disney VHS movies, which
know,
were you could get quite a bit for some of the Disney movies.
but I think again I think of these phones, which they might have got from you, from somebody else, but they can't call 911 if they pawn it. So to me that's I want to say a safety concern. That phone could save their life, but they're having to pawn it off for grocery money in the moment, or again they can't apply for income support, or because they don't have the computer to go to the website to do that application, and or and these sorts of things. That's a double-edged sword.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, all right. That's another one I wanted to bring up here. These two are kind of related in the sense of child welfare, so we'll go through these relatively quickly, and then we'll do the donations. That'll do it. Okay. On September 16th, you said, "Got to have a couple with me who were on the street." Let me start again. On September 16th, that Mark, you said, I have a couple with me who are on the street. They have a 1 week old daughter who is in hospital. Child welfare is involved, and I'm here in my office filling out housing forms and providing hygiene products and some baby stuff. According to the parents, CW has done nothing, again in all caps, to help. It is like they really want another Indigenous child in care. Did you end up getting that sorted out with them?
Yeah, that was part of the meeting that I had with Abert to Matt. That was just a situation where the baby was in the hospital and you've got the parents that are on the street and no one's really working. And they were sleeping at the hospital when they could, but no one was working with the parents to get them in some housing
Mm.
and to get them some supports so that they could be the primary caregivers of this baby once the baby was released from the hospital. It was like, obviously, it was a situation where it was either going to get dumped onto income support, where, here's your baby, leave the hospital, and you'd have to phone emergency social services and get put in a hotel room and no way to sterilize your bottles again.
Right. Right.
Or B, um, the baby would go into care. Uh, so my focus was to try to get children's services, again, from my perspective at that moment, doing nothing to doing everything
Mm.
to ensure that that baby could thrive and could bond with mom and dad and the families could move forward.
Did that happen?
When I spoke to Avert, they were really focused on the issue. I gave my card. They had my phone number. They were texting me. But after I had my meeting with Avert, I didn't hear back from the family. So in that case, no news is great news.
Is it okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Means things got sorted out. There weren't any more issues, so they didn't need your help. Is that the idea?
That's been usually the outcome when in those scenarios when I don't hear from people, is that it's been sorted out.
Okay.
No one wants to hang out with me, Kevin, unless they have to.
I love hanging out with you, Mark. Sincerely. The next day, September 17th, I'm at a meeting with a mom who has 3 children in care, all of whom are permanent wards of the government unless circumstances change. Mom had some organic and environmental issues, including an abusive ex. Now she has completed treatment, is on medication, and has an excellent support team, including family. Child welfare has been great on this file, working with the mom to revoke the PGO status perhaps one day. So that sounds like a pretty good outcome, and child welfare seems to be on, at least at the time, was on top of
Yeah.
the file so that she
y-
can that her children won't be hence the word permanent, will no longer be permanent wards of the government.
Yeah. And I need to make this clear as well,
Yeah.
because people get a hold of me because they're in conflict with systems. Child welfare isn't doing their job, or I can't see this and that's wrong with these systems and that system. But there are a lot, Kevin, there are a lot of families who interact with the systems, whether it be child welfare or the justice system or the healthcare system, and have positive experiences. And I wanted to highlight this because I think this is more of the rule than the exception. You have some really great people that are trying to help. And and on many occasions it does happen. I would never hear about it or see about it because if things are working, again, why would you want to phone me and hang out with me if things are working? When I maintain a relationship with a family over years or decades sometimes, or even months, you get to see these successes. And I just wanted to highlight that.
Thousand
And
percent.
I should be trying the people that phone me on a Monday or Tuesday morning at 3 in the morning aren't there to share good news with me.
Sadly, sad most of the
Yeah.
time. Sadly, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But everyone wants to, would love to hang out with you, Mark. But I appreciate that they want to that they have a many people have a reason why they're calling you as far as this, what they're facing at the time. That's understandable. But hopefully you do have somebody, maybe not clients, but people calling you saying, "Want to go for coffee? Want to hang out?" or what have you. I hope that your life isn't completely consumed by people calling you just for the in those circumstances. Sorry to get too personal on you, but that's my hope.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. So,
Okay, good. That's happening too. Good. Glad you have a bit of balance there, in addition to your family, of course. Um, Talk to us about donations. How are things going?
um, well, donations are always, that's not, that's not what I'm hardwired for is asking people for money and donations. I really wish I could just do my work and never have to ask. I really do. Um, y- y- I just feel awkward and uncomfortable asking. But for me to succeed and for me to support and help, there has to be some resources. Maybe this might be a really good subject material for the next podcast, but as being someone that's independent, I'm not reliant on government funding. And thus, the only sort of area that I can lean on is community funding. And that means people that are watching this or following me on Twitter or Instagram. And I just really depend on, it doesn't have to be a lot. It just could be monthly donations. It can be a one off if you want. And because we're a federally registered charity, you get a tax receipt. Know that that doesn't seem to be a big game changer for many people, but it's there as well. I'm hoping that people will appreciate what I'm trying to do and support the efforts that I put into this by providing some financial support or some in-kind support, such as cell phones and things like that. Chromebooks, cell phones are the two big things
Yeah,
I'm looking for right now. I'm really dependent on donations and for this to work.
and
But
I'll jump in there
M equals
by saying unlocked factory reset phones because you can't use them if, otherwise.
most smartphones now have to come unlocked, like be unlockable under the new CRTC guidelines.
Oh, I didn't
It's
see that.
a lot easier to unlock a phone than it was 3 or 4 years ago.
Oh,
I don't want anybody knowing,
yeah,
seeing your baby pictures or your selfies at the restaurant. So it's really good to clean it off and unlock it and just, so you're right, Kevin. Unlocked,
yeah.
cleaned out phones would be
Yeah, but
great.
you don't want your personal information on any device that you're donating, no matter where it's going. It's a Google search away, quite honestly, to figure out how to wipe the device clean and then giving it to get in touch with Mark and give it to somebody who needs it. Particularly if it's an Android phone, the iPhones. I speak to my own experience where they hold the value pretty well, and the trade-in is usually worth it. But for the kind of the older phones, it's not aren't even that old, where you can't get much for them, then at least it's not just recycling that you can give them to Mark, and it doesn't even need a phone plan, don't need a SIM card, none of that. They could be used to call 911, and then people can use Chromebooks, for example, to apply for something like income support or be on a Zoom call with family or what have you to meet those needs because the internet and is very much a utility as we all know. Have donations been coming? Are you doing all right in that sense? Because I know there was a couple of times this summer where you said you were kind of struggling in that regard.
I had a okay month last month.
But of course, the more the better, right?
I'm feeling awkward and weird about that.
That's the reality of it, Mark. You need the
Yeah. Yeah.
donations to do the work that you need to do, and to again help, to use your words as you've said many times, to bridge those gaps to help those people in need that aren't getting help in other ways. So, and the only way to do that in most cases, aside from advocacy, which you do quite a bit of, but for the essentials that people need, hygiene products, hence the video that you did and so forth, gasoline for the car, etc. Right, the list goes on of the things that cost money. Never mind helping people with some rent or other essentials. That those come from donations. I don't want to downplay it. You need it to do.
Yeah.
You need donations to do the work that you're doing to help these people. Period.
Yeah. Yeah, I do.
Excellent. I know you don't like asking for it. Nobody likes to talk about money, and many of us are struggling financially to a certain extent, cost of living, etc. So I can appreciate that. But if you could find $5 or $10 a month, even this month, never mind next month, everything helps, Mark,
Yeah.
in terms of the people that you're helping and these
Yeah.
various situations that you describe. Everything costs money. It just does.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Mark, maybe we'll leave it there. We could clearly go on, but I don't want to exhaust us. And I know it's been an interesting week, but I know that August and September, you've been in high demand. Thank you for making the time to talk with me today and to share these stories, because to your point a moment ago, I hate bringing this up, but I need to, when you were door knocking, talking to people, regardless if it's for that political campaign or not, people tend to understandably be focused on what's happening in their lives and what affects them. So by reminding people of these issues exist, they might not do something about it that moment or that day, but there are that we need help. We need to help people in our community, help each other out in our communities. And it doesn't take a lot it sounds cliche, but when we all work together,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
we're always going to meet somebody, or even know somebody who is in certain situations where they could use a little help, and it might be you or I one day. Hopefully not, but life tends to throw us curveballs. So whether it be something you can donate, money you can donate, or listening to this podcast, sharing it,
Yeah.
anything like that helps.
Yeah.
Truly. All right. Yeah, you said you got to go. You have things to do, Mark. Thanks for taking the time today, Mark. Always a pleasure.
Okay. You take care, Kevin. Thanks again.
All right. Talk later, Mark.
Bye.
As we wrap up episode 4, Mark's stories remind us of the urgent need for change. From the mom forced to pawn her belongings to feed her kids, to the Indigenous family struggling with a system that seems stacked against them. These are not isolated incidents. They're part of a much bigger problem. As one of Mark's volunteers, Mark has graciously allowed me to take a moment to promote my home business. So I'm going to do that. One of the things I do for Mark as a volunteer is connect remotely to his laptop about once a month, sometimes more often, and perform a tune-up. This includes Windows updates, program updates, and specific tune-up related tasks to ensure his laptop, which he absolutely depends on for his work, is working well. If you'd like me to do this sort of thing for you, like a system cleanup or a monthly tune-up and many other tasks that can be done remotely, please check out my home business website at kevinthetechguy.ca. I will soon offer drop-off computer repair services as well at my home in Red Deer. You can also check out my website for free blog posts. They're often walkthroughs, how-tos that you can follow along with, but more to the point, they're a way for me to be transparent about the work I'm doing for you. When I talk about I'm going to do a system cleanup or a monthly tune-up or what have you, I've documented that on my website as much as I can possible, because certain things are specific to each customer. But generally speaking, I've documented it there in those blog posts for you to read, for you to check out, and that so you know what I'm doing, what work is being done. I do this so that you know what I'm doing. I'm not some guy at just any computer shop, takes it into a back room. You don't know what's being done. I want you to trust me. I want you to know that I know what I'm doing and that I'm not doing anything I'm not supposed to be doing. That's why those blog posts are there. I also offer paid subscription content, and you can purchase individual premium blog posts for $5 each if you're not into the whole subscription thing. Again, I want to thank Mark for allowing me to promote my home business on this podcast. Mark's dedication to helping people, whether it's advocating for parents trying to regain custody or providing essentials like baby formula, this shows just how crucial community support is. how crucial your support is. We hope this episode and each episode we've done and will do, and the clips we've shared, because this can be heavy stuff, and it's probably easier to consume it in kind of smaller bits, that it encourages you to reflect on the gaps in our system and the ways we can all pitch in to help. The biggest way, of course, is to donate to support Mark's work. In episode 6, we're going to take a slightly different approach. Mark and I will be doing a deep dive regarding child welfare, since that's an ongoing theme in many of his tweets and stories. We'll discuss his concerns and why he also sees them as heroes. We'll focus on more stories from his tweets in episode 7 and do more deep dives on specific topics in the future. Thank you for watching and listening.